Okay, so we're going to talk about another method to solve a quadratic equation. It's based on the square root property. So let me do a little review here real quick. You know how if you have like x plus 7 equals negative 10 or something, you want to get, you want to solve for x, you're allowed to subtract 7 from both sides, right? Like we've done that. And you get x equals negative 17. And the idea is because you did the same thing to both sides, it's still an equation. So it's still true. Okay, with the square root property, what we say is, if you have something squared, a variable squared, like x squared, equals a, you're allowed to take the square root of both sides. So I'm allowed to say the square root of this side equals the square root of this side, except there's one little catch. If I had like x squared equals 16. Well, 4 works, right? And that's the square root of 16. But also negative 4 works, right? So, because if I square negative 4, I get 16. So when I take the square root of both sides, I have to put in a plus or minus. It's called the plus or minus symbol. And I have to say, well, it could be positive or it could be negative. You only do that when you're taking the square root of both sides. The square root wasn't there to begin with. I put the square root on. Okay, I did that with the orange pen. So when I put the square root on, when I take the square root of both sides, I have to put the plus or minus in front of that square root. Okay? And so here we're saying x, because the square root of x squared would just be x, equals plus or minus the square root of a, whatever a is, okay? That's the square root property. Okay, now I'm going to go to an example that we did a little bit ago. Remember we had x squared minus 9 equals 0? And we factored difference of squares and we got the two answers. Okay, well, we factored it. I'll just write it out real quick. And then we said, oh, x equals negative 3 or 3. Okay, well now let's look at it a different way. If I were to put the 9 on the other side, like add 9 to both sides. Okay, now I could use the square root property. I could take the square root of both sides. So I could say square root on this side, square root on this side. Oh, but don't forget the plus or minus. I'll probably say that every time I do it because I don't want you to forget. So I get x equals plus or minus, now what's the square root of 9? 3. So did I get two answers? Yes. One answer is negative 3 and the other answer is positive 3, just like we got over here. Now if you're saying to yourself, well, which way do you want me to do it? Do you want me to factor or do you want me to use the square root property? It doesn't matter unless they tell you, hey, solve by factoring or solve by the square root method. Okay, so we're going to do some other examples, though, where we want to solve using the square root property. Okay?